wanted this course to be a course that is interesting to a larger group, so that we could start a trend. So as I said, we want to be making history here, starting something that in the future we may have several different professors from different universities giving their very specific courses to a much larger group than the group that he or she would be able to assess in their own programs. So just going there to our Moodle platform, as I said, we will always, right at the top here, we will have the indication of where our broadcast is taking place, and whenever we finish the movie that we recorded, the presentation that we recorded, will be included in its right position here in our program. So after we finish the first class, here at the top of the page we will have again the program for next class and telling you how many hours we still have until then, and then I clicked here, didn't and then here below we have all the different classes as we planned. Hopefully it will happen exactly like planned, but as with any plan, we may have to make some change. If we make any changes, it will show here, and I will contact you. Notice that I included here at the top of the page right below where we have our YouTube link here. I asked you to provide me with more contact information here, right? So if you click at this place here, you will get to a form in which I will ask a few questions that will make our contact easier if we need to tell you about anything that's happening. And Danilo is also including everyone's telephone number in a WhatsApp group. For those who are not here, I have to show you that I will be probably the only one who will not be included, because this is the kind of technology that I use. At some stage I may explain why I use this technology, but it's not going to be today. But anyway, we will have someone in the class with WhatsApp on during the class, so that if you have any questions, if you want to say something, if you just want to warn me and tell me that you don't have the sounds or the image or whatever, WhatsApp is going to be our very efficient way of communicating, right? So for now, I think Danilo only has some 5 or 6 people in his WhatsApp group, but hopefully by the end of the day today, we'll have everyone included there, because we'll have the information that you fill in this link here. Okay. I think all of you have already had access to the teaching plan. This was something that was sent to you beforehand, trying to explain what the course is about. But anyway, if you haven't, my task for today is going through the whole program and telling you what we plan to do over this 10 weeks that we have until the end of our course, right? First thing that we'll be discussing, and in fact this we'll start doing today, for those who got my messages, you probably already had an assigned task that was reading Mr. Carr's 2003 paper, in which he very loudly said to the world of IT, the IT community, IT doesn't matter. This was published in Harvard Business Review. You all know that Harvard Business Review is a very impactful journal in not only in academia, although it's not an academic journal, because papers there do not follow that academic structure that we usually see in our academic papers. It's a journal that publishes results of academic work, or at least things that are being discussed in the academic world, and try to explain this to a larger, broader group of people. In general, in this case, Harvard Business Review ends up being read by CEOs, CIOs, CFOs, all those chief officers of organizations around the world, people that are taking decisions in the organizations. And of course, when someone writes a paper or publishes a paper in a very renowned journal saying IT doesn't matter, it definitely matters to us who are discussing IT. We have to either try to understand the arguments so that we agree with them and maybe find another job, or we have to understand the arguments so that we can fight them back and say that things are not exactly like that, right? So for you to be a little easier about that, I can already, even for those who haven't read yet, I can already tell you that Nicholas Carr, not a scientist, a journalist, a very competent journalist, brings a lot of arguments that were already being discussed in academia during the whole 90s. In fact, in the whole 90s, the agenda of the information systems community was dominated by discussing what we used to call the productivity paradox of IT. Right? So Carr is only discussing things that we had already discussed in academia and had been a problem for quite a while, to prove that the investment that we made in information technology was actually paying back, because in general, executives and company owners do not like to throw money in the rubbish bin, right? They want their money to return afterwards. Investments are expected to return their value. And for many companies and for many years, over more than a decade, that was being difficult to measure. Nicholas Carr addresses that, and as we will see, sort of divides or splits IT into different large groups. One that he calls infrastructural IT, and the other one that he calls more like proprietary IT, right? Or infrastructure IT is the one that you would like to have exactly like everyone else, right? You don't want to develop, let's say, you don't want to develop a new network system. You just, we already have standards for that. We follow the standards, right? So for infrastructure technology, we want to follow standards. We want to do exactly the same as everyone else is doing, because by doing the same as everyone else is doing, we're not risking, we're not taking the risks of the pioneer. There's nothing to, usually if we call something infrastructure, it's because we don't think that there is nothing new there that needs to be pioneered. We think that what we have is good. So I'd say that when Nicholas Carr says that IT doesn't matter, he's mainly saying that if IT is infrastructural, then it doesn't matter as a, how would I say, as a difference, as a differentiation factor in the organization, right? If it's infrastructure, you want to be the same as everyone else. However, Mr. Carr himself already admits that there is also some, there are also some technologies that when we develop them in a proprietary way, we can benefit from it in a way that others will not be able to benefit, right? So IT can also provide you with a competitive edge in the markets if you have something that is exclusive. Maybe the challenge is figuring out what should be exclusive, and that we want to develop our own, or we want to hire someone to develop it for us, but develop with very strict contracts clauses that say, well, this cannot go to other companies in the market. And there is also technology that will say, well, here I want to go along with the crowd. Okay, we'll discuss that further in the second half of today's class. Another thing that is typical in Brazil, we usually, and mainly when we have a 4-hour class like we do, we have a 15-minute break in Brazil for coffee, right? In Mexico, I don't know, the first thing that I thought was for tequila, but not, I would say not in the morning. And if we were to think in tequila in Mexico, we would say that our break here would be for a cachaça, right? But no, it's just a break for coffee around, you know, in the middle of our time. And usually what we'll try to do is the first part of the class is going to be after you have already read the papers and everything. The first part of the class is the part that we'll use to discuss based on your actually we'll probably do the opposite. The first part of the class will be the part in which we will have it more like a lecture. I will be talking about the topic, and the second part of the class will be when we'll be discussing your impressions of each one of the papers that you read, right? And then so that for that to work, what we'll do is, see here you have this, your impressions about papers you read. You will always have to read the papers that are assigned to one of the classes before class. And we will also have to come here. I will click here just to, for example, I've already included a few of them here, right? And here, for example, car, IT doesn't matter. You will click here, and you'll see that, well, I just wrote there, write your thoughts about car 2003, some 500 to 1,000 words, right? That's about half a page to a page, right? You have a paper that is sometimes 10, 15 pages long. I want you to extract what you think that is the most important part of it, based on your own perspectives, right? This is not a summary in the sense that you're not summarizing the ideas of the authors only, right? You're actually telling what hit you the most, what you thought were the most interesting arguments based on your own experience. Why is that important for us, that we're not just trying to be loyal to what the author thought was more relevant? Of course, the author, when an author writes a paper, he or she has an idea of what is his main objective with that paper. But each one of us, as readers, become, as I usually say, the authors of our own interpretation of our own reading. And I want a little of that coming in. I don't want you to start bringing facts and information from other, from your life at this stage. I want you to strictly discuss things that appeared from the text that you read. But I think it will be really enriching when we compare what each one of us thought was important for the author or what was important for us afterwards. So again, in summary, what I want here is I don't want them all these summaries to be the same. Then it will be boring, right? And you don't even have to make an effort, I can assure you, to make sure that they're different. You just have to, you read a paper and then you say, okay, what is left? What do I think that I will carry for my life from what I read here? And if you think that way, I am sure that you will come up with at least slightly different perspectives. That's what I want to analyze in the second half of the class, right? So the first half of the class, I will sort of give you my impressions of the papers you read, which are just another impression. This is the moment that we'll stick to the traditional way of doing things, right? The professor here broadcasts his ideas of a paper that, well, in most of these papers I've read many times. I can assure you that if the impression that I had the first time I read was different from the impression I had the 5th or the 10th time I read it, and I can assure you that most of this changing perspective also happens because of the discussions that we have in class. So I think the discussion is really what will enrich our program here, and this will do basically, or at least we'll start it here on Moodle by replying here. What you will notice, and for those who have already taken a class with me, where many times we use Moodle, even in a regular class where we are all in the same environment, is that at this time I chose a different kind of form where you will only see, if I did it right, you will only see your colleagues' answers or your colleagues' reflections. Let's say it's not answers because there's no, it's not a question. I'm just saying, provide us with your thoughts about this paper, right? You will only see what others wrote after you wrote your own text. Okay. Of course, if you're the first one to write, you will write, and you'll see where is what the others did, and you'll see that there's nothing there yet. But as soon as the others finish this part of their work, you will start seeing what others have included there. And another thing that we will try and do, it's still not showing here, but it will show for the next classes, is I have one student here at our graduate program that is trying to make Moodle a little more what we call Web 2.0, right? Some of you who have already taken my collective intelligence course know what I'm talking about, but basically is we want our forums, for example, to be more interactive in the sense that it's not questions and answers. It's not just I post a link here for you to include your impressions about a paper, and then you include your impressions and nobody says anything about it. We will have the opportunity of, I guess you've all once already bought something at Amazon.com or any other companies that allow you after buying something to provide your opinion about that product, right? You will, in this case, we'll do something similar to that. We will provide our own opinion about our colleagues' impressions. So we'll give them stars. We'll say, well, I like this summary or this text that my colleague wrote was very enlightening to me because it allowed me to see the paper from a different perspective, right? And notice, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the best, the text that was best written or anything, but it was a text that brought you something that you hadn't thought of. So maybe you give that text 5 stars, and you give another one 3 stars or 1 star or whatever. Well, differently to what happens in Amazon, people are rating products. We will be rating our colleagues' interventions, right? So I want us to take that at this stage as really we learning from the impression we're causing on our colleagues, right? We'll still have to refine this tool until it gets a good tool for what we're trying to do. It's his first approach. In fact, he hasn't coded anything yet. He's just dealing with customizations that are already possible in Moodle itself. But at this stage, it will show whenever someone assesses our own summary, it will be rated and we'll get 3 stars, 4 stars. We'll get an average of whatever the ratings were, and it will show to everyone, right? At the end, this is not what I want, because I think that sometimes we're more inspired, other times we're not. So at the end, what we want to have is we'll highlight the comments or the ideas that more people thought that were insightful, so that they are more to the top in a discussion stream, and they allow the others, when reading, to consider those as more, let's say, read those first or whatever, right? But when Paulo's work is finished, we don't want, let's say, to have someone that, well, this is the worst comment or whatever, right? We don't want that to happen, because that's not, first of all, that's not the intention of the rating. The intention of the rating is using the intelligence of the collective here to say, well, this was more insightful, and it was more insightful for more people. So at the beginning, we'll have to be, I know that sometimes it's difficult for us to take other people's opinion, mainly when it's sort of putting us down. At the beginning, that will be what happens because the tool still doesn't allow us to do any different. In the future, my plan is that we can highlight the really good opinions and give those people the credit. Usually we say that when we're talking about collective intelligence, that people do things for love, money, or glory. That's Malone, 2010, I think. So we want to give people the glory of say, wow, this guy gave us a very interesting perspective. But at the same time, if we want to build a collective intelligence society, we will have to also provide those who were not so insightful with incentive to be better the next time, right? So when Paulo is finished with his work, what we expect is that we can, let's say, show that someone has done really good to everyone, and show that people are improving, even if they're not outstanding in the group, but we can show that they're improving to themselves. So we want to keep some of these valuing systems to the people's own assessment. For now, let's think we're all in the same boats. We're all we're all trying to be as insightful as possible. Some of us will find it easier some will have more problem with English, some will have less, right? There's already a language barrier. We have all different situations here that will make some of us probably do better in this kind of assessment than others. But think we're not assessing people here, we are assessing ideas, and we are assessing ideas with the only purpose of getting a better learning environment in which we are we are all building the knowledge that is happening there. Okay, so one task that you have for those who have already read, we're not going to be doing this for the car paper this week, because some of you had the chance of reading it, others haven't yet. So what I'll do is in the second half of the class, I will discuss this paper in further detail with you. But for all other classes, before our meeting on Friday mornings, Brazilian time, you will have to already have posted, before 8:20 in the morning, our time here, you will have to already have posted your summary here of 500 to 1,000 words for each of the papers that you read. There is no way out. This is one of the advantages, and this is one of the things why I don't accept that the secretary of a program says online courses are not good for us. First, this is online only because it's the technology for us to meet, but we are here all at the same time. We will be able to interact as if we were in the same room, and at the end I will ask your supervisors or someone at your university to provide a place and a time for you to take the final exam. So this is it couldn't be more serious than we're doing. So we'll deal with these programs and try to make sure that as many of you get the credits for this course, as many as we can at this stage. Although it should be understood that this is risky business yet, because nobody has done this before, right? In the future, we hope that this will be the way to go for everyone. Right, okay, so understood this thing about the impressions about the paper. So for next week, you already, sorry, not next week, 15 days from now, you already have to write these summaries for Bryn Johnson's 1998 paper, Beyond the Productivity Paradox, and also for IT-enabled business transformation. Is that what we have there? We just have to go back to the program here. Let's see what we have there. Yeah, Bryn Johnson 1998, and Henderson and Venkatram, right? But going back to my purpose of this first half of the class, we have to discuss the value of IT, because there are people telling us that IT doesn't matter. And it's really weird when we think that it doesn't matter, but companies invest the amount of money they invest on technology or information technology, right? So if it doesn't matter, why are we spending money on it? Okay, one reason could be, okay, if I don't invest here, the competition will do it, and I will be out of business. That actually happens, and that may be a weird reason for you to invest, but it's a reason to invest so that you keep in business, right? It probably happens to many of the infrastructural technologies. We'll discuss more about that in the second half of today's class. But this discussion on the value of IT led us to another discussion that was well, maybe if we're not providing value, if we're spending money on IT and it's not returning, maybe it's because we're not doing it in a strategic way. How is IT impacting strategy? How is IT allowing a company to have a better business, a better value proposition than it had without IT? Of course, if we discuss that with the technologies that we have today, it may be a little different than discussing it from the perspective of Mr. Bryn Johnson in 98 or of Henderson and Venkatraman 99. Right? But you'll see after reading those papers that what we're doing today is a follow-up to what these guys were telling us that needed to be done some 20 years ago. Okay? In fact, many companies, for most of the papers that I'm assigning here for this course, I would say most of these papers could still be taken to CEOs or to CIOs, the chief executive officers or the chief information officers, at least at many organizations, and say, look, you should read this. You're 20 years behind. You're still not getting it, right? IT can be used for very different things than the one that you're using, or the money has to be spent in a very different way to the way that you're spending it, right? This discussion will happen in this class that has as its purpose to say that for IT to be successful, it has to be properly aligned to the business strategy. We don't want the business to go one way and the IT department or the IT decisions to go a different way, because that is surely one of the major reasons for failure in IT investment. After we think about how IT could align with business, we get to our third meeting, IT-enabled business strategies. And here we have, two interesting papers still from the 90s, Venkatraman 94 and Venkatraman and Henderson 98. You see, these authors were very influential, at least based on my understanding on what we thought of IT in the 1990s. I had said the 80s, 90s, right? And I would say that the whole course here that you're taking with me was sort of, if it was not inspired, it was modeled by this Venkatraman and Henderson 98 paper. I just want to show you here one of the drawings, one of the figures that they have in this paper, because it will, this figure here, virtual organizing the 3 vectors and 3 stages. You will see when we get, we'll discuss this in much more detail when we get there, but you'll see that this model in which the authors claim that IT could be used in 3 different vectors. One of them would be to improve customer interaction, to improve the ways the company interacts with customers. I would say, if we were thinking about a river, thinking downstream, right? And then he says there's another vector that is asset configuration. Asset configuration is, how do I well, where do I invest, or where does someone invest to help my business proposition work? I look at the asset configuration as being looking upstream the river. It's the processes that happen inside the organization itself, but also the processes and how the process of the organization connects to processes that happen at the suppliers, right? Asset configuration means, it involves a dilemma that has been around mainly in operations management for quite a while. The dilemma of making or buying, right? Do I make something or do I buy from a supplier? The more IT we have, I'd say, the more you buy from someone else, because IT connects your organization to other organizations in a cheaper manner. If it's cheaper for you to connect with others, that means that you reduce the transaction costs involved in buying from another firm. And that makes it more attractive to buy than to produce itself in your own company. So this asset configuration discussion here, and you'll see when we discuss the stages that these authors proposed for asset configuration there in the 90s, probably explains why we've seen so much outsourcing. Why do companies outsource? You see, because it's cheaper to outsource than do things in-house. And then I say, well, if it was cheaper, why didn't they source it outside the company at first place? Why did they, in the past, did those things inside the organization? Basically, because it was difficult or hard or expensive to connect with suppliers outside the company. So the more we have ways of connecting to our suppliers in a cheaper and easy, reliable way, the more we'll find attractive to outsource, at least outsource tasks, procedures, parts of the product, the whole product or whatever. We'll outsource those things that we don't think that are part of our core business. In fact, if you think core business, that is now a term that we all take for granted, was something that started being discussed in the 90s as well. And most of the authors that discuss the focus on the core business are not IT or IS scholars. They are people that are dealing with strategy. And many times they do not relate, or they don't emphasize the importance of information technology for this focus on the core business. But of course, you can only focus on your core business if you can relate to someone else to do the other business that is important to you, but it's important only as ancillary or support business, right? We will discuss asset configuration, and mainly this concern with the ways that IT can help us better deal with our suppliers and the suppliers of our suppliers. And then the third vector that these authors discuss here, knowledge leverage, is basically controlling or trying to organize the way that knowledge happens in the value chain, right? Is value, how can I create value in my relationships with my customers, for example? When I was a manufacturer, produced something like computers that in the past were produced by someone and then shipped to retailers, and then the retailers sold those computers in the market, the manufacturer had very little control, very little knowledge on what was happening with the consumption of that product. Was that what the customer really wanted? It's impossible to know. That was what the customer was provided with. Maybe that was what the customer accepted because there was no other alternative, right? So the customer in the old processes was definitely impacted by what the manufacturer produced, because that was what the customer could get hold of. But but the company never knew if that was exactly what the customer wanted. The company had to guess all the time. Well, it's not selling well. Why is that? Why is it? Is it too expensive? Is it just the wrong product? What is it? Difficult to know because there was not a good way of managing the knowledge that could be achieved from that sale. When you start selling products through the web and you present product A here, product B here, and people click on product A and don't click on product B, the customer is telling you in real time that they're more interested in A than B, right? If you can provide them with several different options and the customer chooses from those, the customer is providing you with a very good information on trends for the market, right? So this knowledge from the customers can be better collected with information technology than it could in the past when our information systems were basically paperwork, or right? It was much more expensive to collect and to analyze that kind of information. The same happens when we look upstream the value chain towards the suppliers. In the past, it was difficult to have a good information flow between the organizations and its suppliers, and that made it so that many times companies even prefer to do things inside the organization because they were more integrated that way, and they could know what was happening. It was just going to the next room or to the other side of the plant, but still in the same place many times, right? So this knowledge leverage here means, okay, we can now structure our business in different ways because technology makes it easier for us to interact with customers and to suppliers, but how do we get hold of the information that is, and the knowledge that is made available in this process, right? So we'll discuss this in a lot more detail, of course, when we get to this paper. But you'll see that from here, I start just after discussing this paper, we start talking about the upstream value, upstream the value chain. Just close this here. How can IT help us better deal with suppliers? And then we have authors already in the 90s giving us a good discussion on how that could happen. Of course, we could not go beyond this point without talking about the way Dell not only manufactured its computers, but the way it related to its suppliers in one way, upstream, and also downstream, the way it works with its customers using IT, right? So we'll have here this interview with Michael Dell, a text that was also published in Harvard Business Review in '98. I think this is a beautiful presentation of a company strategy. Many times companies don't like to talk about their strategies very, very deeply because they think that their strategy has to be in their headquarters. Nobody else could know about the strategy. The problem is that the strategy has to be somehow announced to the customers because the customers have to understand what your business proposition is. So if you tell the customers, you already told the competition, you already told the suppliers and so on and so forth. So Michael Dell in this interview here tells in a very transparent way what Dell's strategy was at that stage. And it's easy for us to understand, as we'll discuss here, why it was successful for so long, right? Of course, it's not the same any longer. Dell was very successful until the first decade of this century, so until 2005, 2006. After that, it had its own problems, but its model is still a very interesting model for us to understand the ways that technology can help companies better connect to customers, to suppliers, and even manage its knowledge. So see, I'm referring back to Venkataraman and Henderson's model. Uh, then we have something interesting here. Maybe some of you know of this ISLA conference. ISLA Information Systems in Latin America is a conference that the Latin American and Caribbean chapter of the Association for Information Systems has been putting on for the last 3 years. It always happened in the first semester. First one was exactly in this room, right? It happened in 2014. Well, it started really small. We had Professor Robert Davison, who's one of the most distinguished professors in our fields, coming from Hong Kong to give us a speech right in this room where we are right now. And we had, it was broadcasted to many places in Latin America. I remember that we had a lot of problems with technology, which we tried to solve over the years. But the idea of this conference is that people can take place on it from anywhere. There's no fee, so it's free, and people can watch it from anywhere. The first one was here. Second one was it was in Paraíba, in João Pessoa, and the third one was in Porto Alegre. And this year, our idea was not to have a place, because basically the place was where some of the people that were organizing would go, and then from there we would broadcast to other places. But even in our last one in Porto Alegre, even the speakers were not there in Porto Alegre, right? Or most of the speakers were not there. We had people broadcasting from all over the place. And this year, we want to have it without a specific city as the place where the conference is happening. And we want to base every year we're trying something different. We want to base ISLA on interviews that are prepared by professors or students in the information systems field with other professors or students or whoever is with other researchers in the area. So, and your task, I cannot say that your interviews will be featured in the ISLA conference necessarily, but you'll have the task for this class here is each one of you will have by this time, by this date, July 21st. In fact, we will not have a formal class this day, but you'll have a link here in our Moodle platform to upload a link to an interview that you made with a researcher that you think that is an interesting researcher to interview. We all have the technology today because we can do that from our cell phones, Skype, or whatever. You just have to record it. Of course, what is the major task? You have to read one of the person that you want to interview. You have to read one of their works, some paper that you find interesting, and you have to make an interview, record it, and we'll broadcast. Then, if it is selected for ISLA later, we will broadcast it during ISLA, and we'll invite the person that you interviewed to be there, at least virtually, in the sense of if people have questions afterwards, they can have a forum conversation or whatever. So start thinking. It could be, for those of you who are watching us from a distance, it could be an interview with, for example, I know that we have here some students that are supervised by Professor Maureen Lobler in Universidade Federal de Santa Maria. I think we may have someone from UNAM in Mexico, and maybe you could interview Guillermo Abitia. I know that we have here students from the Universidad Católica de Chile. Maybe you could interview Aurora Sanchez, or I know that there are people here from Uninove. Maybe you can interview Cristina Martins. Where else? I know that there are students here that are from Universidade Federal da Bahia. Maybe you could interview Professor Hernani Marques. and so on and so forth. Maybe you could interview another professor locally. Sometimes it's easy for you to set, just put your mobile phone there and interview someone that is at the same place, or you can do an interview through Skype with eventually one of our authors here, right? Most of them are, although they wrote in the 90s, most of them are still alive and around, and some of these old chaps are very nice people to talk to, because sometimes they are already retired, but they still, it would be still very interesting to see what their perspectives are for the world. So an idea, try to check what these guys are doing these days, get their latest paper, read their latest paper, and send them an email and ask them if you could, if they would be happy to provide you an interview for a graduate course or whatever. Just make sure that the technology infrastructure is there so that you can record it, and it will be fine, right? We have been doing that for also for Lacai's Tube. It's another thing that we're starting. Notice that that the Latin American Caribbean chapter of AIS, we don't have any money, we don't have any, but we have plenty of ideas. And one other thing that we've been trying to do is rescue these the good professors and the good researchers that we have in the field, rescue the information they have, and also have it on video, considering that now it's so cheap and easy to record things. So last year we recorded with I think a couple of videos with McLean. You probably, if you go to the Lacai's Tube channel, you will see McLean was one of the first. We will not be reading any of his papers directly here, but McLean is the guy from the DeLone and McLean model, one of the models. In fact, maybe I will bring it in. I hadn't thought of including it here, but maybe we could even bring McLean's paper on the successful use of IT to our discussion, and you'll see that that's exactly what we did last year. We had an interview with him, asking him how much that model that had been first published in the 90s and that he revisited later in the early 2000s, how he thought the model was still valid. Of course, it demands a little reading of the researcher's work, but on the other hand, we'll be able to have that on video in addition to whatever these authors already have on journal papers, right? We have to make information systems more inclusive to other people that are not necessarily doing their master degrees or their doctoral degrees. We have to do a little bit of what Harvard Business Review does, right? Make whatever we do here more accessible to other people. And one way of doing that is recording videos on what we're doing. And it's also, I always say it's good when we see that our authors are also regular people like we are, right? You go there, you talk to this person, and you see it's just a normal person. So I can do what he or she does, right? So let's try to. You have to think of that, because we have a little more than, well, we have some 40 days until we have to have this ready. So I would say don't get too ambitious, right? If you don't have a good contact, but if you have an author that you like and that you're acquainted with the ideas of this author, reread their latest work, or reread just whatever work you thought it was good that they made. Prepare a few questions, send an email and check, well, I have these questions, I would like to record a quick 10-minute video of you answering me those questions. You'll be happy to do that. Try to do that, and you'll see that it will work fine, and we'll have some interesting material here. And you may be thinking, gee, have I become cheap labor for ISLA? No, I'd say that by doing that, yeah, well, you definitely are becoming cheap labor for ISLA, but that's what we do in academia. We're all cheap labor for whatever we're doing, right? I can assure you that I do a lot of that too, so I'm not requesting you to do anything different to things that we have to do all the time. You're actually having a chance of revisiting the ideas of an author that you think that is interesting for whatever reason, and having a direct personal contact with the possibility of saying, well, look, if this looks good, if I can, there's always the technical problems of it, but if I can arrange this in a good way, this will be featured in this conference that is also not really well known for being there for many years. It's been there for only 3 years, but I think it's becoming an interesting place for us to discuss information systems, not necessarily and not only in Latin America, but information systems discussed by Latin Americans, and we want to know what the authors that inspire us think, not necessarily again about Latin American specific issues, but what they think about information systems that could help us in our region. Okay, that's so this is a break in the reading here because we have to prepare that video, and then we keep going. We'll discuss another vector, another Venkataraman and Henderson vector. Download the value chain, how IT can help us better deal with customers. 2 papers here. Makina, 1995, real-time marketing. This is definitely a paper that I say that, you know, should be given to many marketing people today. 22 years later, we have to tell any marketing, or not any, but most marketing people in the organization say, look, read what this guy was saying in the 90s, because you're still not getting it, right? And basically what Mr. McKenna was telling us there in the 90s was that with our information technologies, we are allowed it to build a dialogue with our customers. Build a dialogue means a two-way dialogue, right? We don't have to keep broadcasting ads on TV, right? He was in 95, he was saying, we still don't have it, not the way that it will be in the future, but we will have the internet. Make sure that you use of course we already had the internet, but not the way that we have today. You should use the internet to build a dialogue with each one of your customers, right? One by one. Of course, one by one, not that you have someone, one of your employees talking on the phone to a person on the other side, because that costs a lot. But one by one, build a dialogue, make sure that your customers talk to your systems and feed your systems with information that is useful for you to perform future businesses with those customers. And Nambisan 2008 talk about virtual customer environments. I would say that here, specifically with respect to this downstream, the value chain analysis, I would love to have a good 2017 paper that we're discussing this already based on the technology that we are using today. WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. I have to tell you that Nambisan and Nambisan 2008 are still very concerned with the big screen. And we have to think that mainly the consumers, the end customers, don't have computers any longer. I mean, they may have the computer, but they're not using the computer any longer because they have a computer in their pockets. And we have to start discussing now how we address these customers that carry their computers in their pocket all the way, telling where they are all the time, right? And who are not concerned at all, for the good and for the bad, about providing information about themselves. They're very, let's say, easy about their own privacy. And they're not very concerned about privacy issues. I think for the good and for the bad, but there's a lot that companies can do by looking at that. I'd say for all of the other topics, I say if we stick to what was being said in the 90s, we're still really fine. here, with respect to the way that we deal with our customers, I'd say, well, the ideas are clever, right? What they said there are still are still very, very valuable ideas. The concepts are good, but the technologies are not those any longer. Right? The way we connect, the ways that we connect with our suppliers is still computers, EDI, and computers talking to computers, but the ways that we talk to end customers is changing a lot, and the way that we can benefit from the dialogue that we build with customers is also very different from the past, right? Rafaela is currently studying the empowerment of women entrepreneurs in Facebook, basically Facebook, right? And one of the things that she's noticing is that some of these entrepreneurs are, well, they're definitely not CIOs, or many times the only thing that they know is how to turn on their phone camera, right, and start a live on Facebook. But that allows them to build this dialogue with customers. And when they start doing their lives, and when they start presenting whatever they do on the web, all those customers that are there to benefit from a content that is being exposed become also, or not all, but many of them also become like almost like employees working for them, and helping other customers benefiting the most from that experience. For example, in lives, it's very usual that someone gets to a live after it has already started. And then the first question is, what are you doing there? What is the topic today? What are you discussing? Of course, the person who's presenting cannot be reading what is happening there, but suddenly everyone else starts saying, oh, you know, what she did here was this and that, and you have to do this and that, so that you have to download whatever file from whatever place to make sure that you profit the most from what she's saying. And so how do these people get so many people to help them do their own businesses, and why they do that? So we have to start understanding these things as well. And I would say that the downstream value here of the value chain is, we're only half the way through. I would like to have something newer here to include. Maybe by July the 28th, you notice that when we get 1 week before that, I'll tell you, look, you thought that you had 2 papers to read. Now you see that you have 3, right? So maybe we'll have something, but if we don't, just understand, as for most of the course, what we're doing here is we're talking about fundamentals. We're talking about the grounds on which, the concepts on which to build ideas with respect to information technologies and information systems in our times, right? Then we'll get to, okay, so if we're changing the way we deal with our customers, if we're changing the way we deal with our suppliers, if we're changing our process and everything, so we are actually dealing with technological change. And technological change, as any other change in a business environment, or in any other environment, involves or should involve some concern about, is the change happening in the planned way? If we are, I mean, if we're still using an approach in which we plan and then we want to execute it exactly how it was planned, or even if it's a more loose change, is it going in a direction that we think that is good for whatever our intents are? So managing change became something important, even since the 90s and early 90s, to IT professionals, and to IT, what is important to IT professionals ends up being important for IT researchers, right? So I included there this Benjamin and Levison 1993 paper, a framework for managing IT-enabled change. When we get to that, you'll see that this is a very structured way of dealing with it. It's a very, based on strategic planning. I first plan, and then I make a plan for the change, and then I see how that plan, how that change will affect people, and then my plan also includes what I have to do with respect to each one of those people or departments or customers or suppliers or whatever, what I have to do to make sure that my plan is successful. Right? This is one approach, but it's a very, I'd say, autocratic approach. It's an approach where I know the truth, I know what is good, and I will even, I understand that you don't, but I will impose the change on you like a despot, right? Many companies are like that, but this imposing the change does not help you include people in the decisions, not only to be more democratic, because democracy is just one way of doing things, right? And many times if you have the power, you don't necessarily want to be very democratic. You want to enforce your own opinion. It seems that it's always been like that for mankind. But because many times when you include people, you get their good ideas as well. So again, if we think, and some of you will think that I'm being a little repetitive here, mainly those that have already taken the collective intelligence course. Yes, maybe if we rely on other people's ideas, and their ideas may be better than ours. If we accept that, we will think of other ways of managing change. I included a few papers there. I put them at least two of them as optional there, but I included one, the last one, Beyond IT Acceptance. It's papers that result from research that we were carrying out. It was Ricardo Engelbert was one of my doctoral students a few years ago. And we were discussing the ways when we have a technological change, and many times it is imposed originally by someone who adopts the technology, basically the decision maker. Many times the owner of the business or a director, someone powerful enough to decide this is going to be the way things will go. And after someone adopts a technology, and adoption here means because adopt comes from the word opt, choose, right? After someone chooses, and whoever chooses had alternatives, the other people in the organization have to accept, right? And when we have to accept the technology, we don't have the alternatives any longer, or actually, at least our alternatives were reduced to yes, I accept, or no, I don't accept. And many times if I say no, I don't accept, they'll say, okay, so goodbye, right? You look for another job because whoever is here needs to accept. We discussed this. We discussed that acceptance is not as binary as I'm saying here, right? So many times you accept, you could accept enthusiastically because you think, wow, this is all that I needed. That usually is not the case. You could refuse the technology also in a very definitive way. I said, no, I'm not going with that. But many times we'll find a comfortable way in the middle that will please our boss who has adopted the technology, so that he or she does not have to explain why millions are spent on this software or hardware or whatever that is not being used according to the plan. So you deal with that in a way to please the boss, but at the same time not do exactly the way that he or she had planned because you don't completely agree with that idea. That's acceptance. And then we discuss here also what we call appropriation of technology. That is the way that the users develop their own. Actually, the user takes a product and develop its own personal use of it. So the user becomes, to some extent, the developer of his or her own solution. I think this is something interesting that we've done. It's a simple idea, but I'm sort of proud of it. Many times in academia, we discuss complex ideas that many times we don't understand them very easily. The concepts and the little model that we wrote, it's mainly Ricardo's work, but we work together on that. The main concept there is that the user is also a developer of his or her own solution, and it should be like that. companies shouldn't find that. They shouldn't think that that's reacting, that's denying change. That's actually improving change and allowing the company again to build a dialogue with its own users, its own employees. When you force people to use something your way, it's the old logic, broadcasting. I think and you obey. When I allow some flexibility for people to use the technology in a different way, this flexibility will show me again, well, they're using it in a different way than I had thought. Why is that so? When I understand that, I say, oh, okay, so maybe I'll make changes in the technology so that more people can benefit from this clever idea that those guys there had, right? So building a dialogue allows other intelligent people to be included in some more common decision making, and this is our here when we talk about the technology change, adoption, acceptance, and appropriation in organizations. We're sort of getting a little away from the Venkatraman and Henderson model for the first time, and then we cannot do that without talking about the change, adoption, acceptance, and appropriation of IT by our society. Because we are, as a society, we are doing all those things at a rate that we had never done in the past, right? Until the 90s, people's information technology was a notebook, right? And it was actually a notebook where you took notes on paper, right? Many people, or most people, didn't have access to electronic information systems as we do today. Now we all do. And how are we using this? We have to understand this as well. I know that many of you are very focused on organizations, but IT is influencing our life as a society so much that I think that we deserve to discuss that, at least to some extent. And there I included a class on a few other, Carr again, Nicholas Carr, the same journalist that we start with today, with a text, with a paper that he wrote, which has as its title, "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" Right? I hope when you read it, you don't realize that it has already made us stupid, okay? Considering that he wrote that in 2008, so it's been a few years already, and he was questioning as if we were in the middle of the process, right? So now, 7 or 8 years later, more than that, almost 10 years later, we would expect not to have become stupid, but after you read that, we'll have to discuss that and see where we went from there. There is an interview with Nicholas Carr here to Canadian TV. Some of my students have already seen this somewhere else, so that class was going to be very easy for you. And then also a speech by Professor Neil Postman to some college students. This Neil Postman, I don't have any of, well, his books are not online, or at least are not free online, so I didn't include them directly here. But if you have a chance of buying this on a cheap old books store, Building a Bridge to the 18th Century and Technology are very, very interesting books written by him. And those two authors are surely going to shake our understanding on how IT, in their case, IT impacts our society and determines our future. They're very, I think their approach shows us that we really have to think about these things, because they are affecting our life much more than we would expect. And then on the 18th of August, it's a Friday, the 17th and the 18th of August are what we call here the graduate workshop at UTFPR. None of the graduate programs has formal classes those days. And therefore, I haven't planned anything specifically for this day. But what we intend to do is to include in our program here whatever we find interesting that is happening on the 18th of August. It will probably be, I can already tell you that it will probably involve some of our students here presenting work that they have been doing with respect to information systems at graduate level. So, but I can't announce right now because the program is not ready yet. So that's a day that we'll record it, it will be there, but you don't have to be live, right? And then our last class before the final exam, we'll go back to what Venkatraman and Henderson called their third vector. Remember, third vector was knowledge. What was knowledge? Well, it was basically collecting and managing the knowledge from the value chain. We will show here some of the possibilities. You've probably, I mean, you've heard me talk a lot about collective intelligence today already. It's not by, I mean, that's something that we talk about in this program because we have a research line here on collective intelligence. And this last class will actually give you a hint on where we can go with respect to collective intelligence, how we can engage people and people's efforts into helping us develop our products, if we are a company, or our ideas as citizens, if we are a non-governmental agency or whatever, or just how we can associate with other people that have similar interests, so that each one does a small share of the work that needs to be done, and all get the benefits, and so on and so forth. So, and then we have a final exam on September 1st. I will coordinate this final exam with supervisors of students all over the place. Of course, it's a paper traditional final exam. Questions will be, I usually say that the questions, you have a number of questions. The questions will be broad, so that you can use whatever information you got from the course, whatever discussions we had in the course to fill your exam. But the answers, although the questions are broad and allow for broad answers, the answers have to be linked to what was discussed in class. So we don't want what I call pub talk, in which you go there, drink a beer, and talk about anything that is sort of related. No, we want to talk about the ideas that were in the papers or that were discussed in class, discussed in our forums, related to the, so we definitely have to read all those papers. We don't have to know anything by heart. The idea is not to, I mean, in the 21st century, nobody wants to know by heart anything that you can access in one of your secondary memories, hard drives or whatever. But we have to build the synapses, we have to build the connections between all those ideas, and this is what we'll be assessing, right? I usually don't discuss the final exam very much because I don't emphasize it very much. I think it's just, I mean, it's, we have to grade you. We try to do that as honest as we can, and as, I mean, using whatever criteria we have for that, but at the same time, we prefer to be vaguely right and not precisely wrong. So it's not going to be multiple choice. It's going to be open, and in general, you do good. So I don't want to put too much emphasis on the final exam. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. This is our coffee time here, right? We'll stop for 20 minutes. I will keep this going here because it's easier for us to keep the connection going than starting a new connection. If I start a new connection, I'll have to pass you a new link for the connection. So we'll just keep it going. And for whoever is watching this afterwards, you always have that possibility. What you'll do is that you will just fast forward to when we come back. I will also try and use this time to browse the to check here who is still not connected and making sure that everyone is connected and having access to our Moodle platform until the end of the day. Besides, for those of you who have not yet filled in the, where is it? This contact info, please do it. I know that probably most of the info that I ask here, you already sent in that that document that you had to scan and send to me beforehand for those who are not regular students at UTFPR. But that's a scanned version. Again, we do a lot of free and cheap work for conferences and everything, and we are happy to do that. But one thing that I don't want to do is to be, inputting manually all that information to this. That went to the secretary. That's good for you to have access to our platforms and everything. But I would like you to include your data here, because then Danilo and or whoever else is helping us here with the WhatsApp group can include your info there, so that from next class on we can use WhatsApp also as a way of interacting when other things are not working. Okay, so some 15-20 minutes. We'll come back at our time here at about 10:20. Okay, so let's restart here. Well, from next week on, what we'll have here during our break, we'll have, Rafaela just gave us the idea, try to have some music, and this will come back soon. But as I said, to start a second streaming means sending you a second link and everything. And I think it's just better that we just, whatever recording we have afterwards, when we want to watch that, we'll just fast forward. Right, so what we'll do now is we'll start discussing our topic for today. As I said, my original plan was that you were all had already all read Nicholas Carr's paper. I understand, I've just checked during the break, and I see that I still have 3 or 4 students who were not able even to get to Moodle yet. So this time we'll do it a little differently. I will just present my perception of this paper, and we'll probably finish earlier today because of that as well. I usually tend to give much more time for our discussion afterwards. We will not have that today. Before we go any further, just notice here, Danilo just asked me to include this link for the WhatsApp chat. Well, maybe this is a good time for me to explain why I have this phone here. It's because I hate the use our society makes of the technologies we have. I think that we overdo most of the time, and we don't want to overdo with respect to this WhatsApp group, right? So this group, we'll have probably some 15 people there, everyone who's engaged in this class, and we'll use it for, during the class, so that if anyone who's not here with us can and have a question. For example, I just had Davison asking me a question about the ISLA conference, and he said that he didn't understand it very well. He did that through email. After everyone is included in the group, that's something that can be included there in the WhatsApp group. Just remember, you will not access me directly, but you will access, and you have my other contacts there as well. So if you want to talk to me outside the class, email, Skype, there are other ways. They're all listed here. In Skype, yeah, my Skype username is there as well. So feel free to contact me. I will try and answer as soon as I can. During class, or if you have anything that you want to share with the rest of the classmates related to the class, you can use that. But we don't want this group to be another annoying WhatsApp group. I had a smartphone for about a week, And that was enough for me to say I don't want it for the next 3 or 4 years at least, or until or while I stand the pressure, right? Many of the decisions that we take in life are not decisions that we take on our own, and I realize that this decision is not my own decision, but and I get a lot of pressure to change, but I'm still sticking to it. And but anyway, the WhatsApp group is there for you. Don't forget getting into the WhatsApp group if you have a smartphone. Don't forget sending us your info here as well in this other link. And then let's go to Nicholas Carr's paper. As I said to you, when anyone writes a paper with this kind of title in a journal that is so impactful as the Harvard Business Review, it generates a lot of noise, it generates a lot of discussion, and you'll see that this paper, although it's not an academic paper, has a lot of citations. In fact, if anyone could check that on Google Scholar, how many citations IT Doesn't Matter have, you will see that Nicholas Carr, as a journalist, is a very impactful researcher, right? If he was in academia, he would be at the top of the rank just because of the citations he gets for papers from academians, for papers like this. As a good journalist, he also knows that headlines matter, right? We usually, in academic papers, we don't write headlines. We write a title that we think that is related to the paper that we're writing, but it's usually not a headline like in a newspaper. His titles are headlines, and as headlines, they call a lot of attention. After you read this paper, IT Doesn't Matter, you will see that that's not exactly what Mr. Carr is saying, right? He says that some IT don't matter for developing a strategy based on differentiation, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter even strategically. We usually have to include in our companies, in our organization's strategy, investments that are made only so that we are not left behind. Okay, so in that sense, I may have to update my 2005 Nokia one day, only because nobody talks on the phone any longer, which for now seems to be a virtue to me. I get my phone is on, right? I mean, it's on. I mean, if anyone had phoned me during the class, it would ring. It will eventually ring during our sessions here, but I will not even bother turning it off because it rings very seldom. And it will probably, if it rings during class, it will be my wife saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that you were in class." She knows that I'm in class, so she would not ring me at this time unless she gets mistaken. But very few people phone these days, which means that's a concern to me, because of course I want to be connected if someone needs to talk to me. When I notice that nobody else is using this to talk on the phone, I will probably have to change my ways of interacting with the world. And so don't get surprised if I get back to WhatsApp one of these days, right? So that, in my case, if I make that investment, in my case, it's not even buying a smartphone, it's just getting it out of the drawer. If and when I make that investment, it's not a strategic investment in the way that I want to differentiate from the rest of mankind. It's, in fact, the opposite. I want to become the same as everyone else, because the smartphone has become infrastructure in many cases, right? So if I don't have that infrastructure, I don't have access to a network and I'm not talking about a computer network only, but to a network of contacts. And I'm out of, I'm sort of, I become an isolated citizen, and eventually not even a citizen any longer, right? So there is investment that is strategically done, strategically, and what is a strategic investment? It's an investment that we're thinking of because we're thinking about the future implications of that investment, right? The difference between a strategic decision and an operational decision is that the operational decision has direct impacts on something that is happening right now. And strategic decisions are decisions that will have impact in the long run. So that's in fact something that will appear when we discuss the productivity paradox in the next class. One of the reasons that some of the investments that was being done in IT in the 90s, one of the reasons for it not showing in the whatever index or in whatever measures were being taken of productivity was that investments involve a return in the future. And sometimes the measures that you have are not able to capture this difference in time between when you make the investment and when you get the return for it. Okay. So again, strategic investments, I have to invest now, and the return or the impacts will only show later. So I don't think, and I think you agree with me that what Nicholas Carr says here is that IT doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter for differentiation any longer. And that's again a point that we should and could debate, because what he's telling us is that most of IT has become infrastructural. And if it has become infrastructural, nobody's going to get an edge, a competitive edge out of something that is standard. And nobody should try to, because it is standard. And the value of it is actually that it is standard and that everyone is using it and it is taken for granted. It's something that you can use assuming that someone else at the other side is using it also. Notice I gave you the possibility of getting into our WhatsApp group, and although I don't have access to that, I assume that you have. So that's because this technology is becoming, or has already become, except for the stubborn professors, infrastructural, right? But there is, and Nicholas Carr accepts that, but he doesn't put much emphasis, or at least he says that it's not, he would not go that way. There are opportunities for IT to make the difference. We'll probably see when we read the next papers, we'll see that many examples of companies that performed really well because they used IT to differentiate themselves from the competition. So that's what, for Nicholas Carr, would be called a proprietary use of IT. It's a use that you want to do in an exclusive way so that others cannot mimic you, cannot copy what you're doing and get the same performance or neutralize your performance. I have to agree with Mr. Carr that this is riskier. Whenever we're trying to differentiate in the markets, that means that we are doing something that nobody else is doing. So that is obviously and by definition riskier. We're doing something that nobody is doing, that nobody has ever done or whatever. That is what allows us to be different. But by doing that, we expose ourselves to the risk of doing something that is unknown, that nobody has done before. And he claims that we should attempt that companies should not try to differentiate themselves from the competition based on IT. They should differentiate them based on their own product or whatever. Okay, but what is their own product? And what is the way of selling that product? doesn't IT in some cases provide different ways of different and creative, innovative ways of selling your product, manufacturing your product, or whatever that will provide you with the competitive edge? I believe so, and I believe in many cases it's not necessarily that the IT has to be proprietary, or that the IT has to be the means of differentiation, but in some cases it's actually the way you use IT, and in some cases even the way you use infrastructure of IT in different ways from other companies that will provide you with a competitive edge. So you don't even have to risk so much in terms of developing a new technology. In many cases, technology is being developed there on its own. And in many cases, it's just a matter of using this technology in creative, innovative ways that haven't been used before. In that sense, I think that Nicholas Carr is too conservative. He says, use IT the same way as everyone else is using. And I say, okay, that is safe. That means you are not going to be left behind. But if you want to jump ahead, is that enough? In many cases, probably not. In many cases, I believe that we will either have to develop new technology to jump ahead, or we will have to be very creative in using technology that is already around to do things different. These two possibilities are there, and I say that in times of very fast technology development, as the times that we live today, in many cases we don't even have to develop anything different. It's just a matter of understanding in which ways technologies that are already around allow us to do different things. So we're not going to spend more than others on technology. We will shape our structure, we'll shape our culture so that we can benefit from the technology in a way that competition can't. Right? Just to give an example of that will appear in our future discussion here, that was precisely what Dell did in the 80s and 90s. Right? Dell had become, when he gave that interview to Harvard Business Review that we'll discuss in a future class, Dell was actually using the same technology that was available to everyone else to do something different. Right? The 0800 telephone lines were available to any company. And the internet, after a while, at least in the second half of the 1990s, was also available to any company. But Dell organized his business around an idea of connecting directly to, or selling directly to its end customers. That meant using the telephone first, and as soon as another technology, another infrastructural technology like the internet was there, shifting to the internet to sell computers, and to sell computers to each customer in a very customized way, in a way that each customer would get the value and the features and the value they wanted from the company, and at the same time provide the company with the information that the company needed to know what customers in general wanted, right? By selling directly to customers. They were just using the internet. Infrastructural technology, according to Nicholas Carr, and I would not agree with that. Would not disagree with that. It's definitely infrastructural technology, but it's an infrastructural technology that other companies were not being able to use the same way, because then IBM, Compaq, and HP, that were the companies that were Dell's major competitors in the PC markets, in the personal computer markets, were all companies that had very structured distribution channels to sell their products to the end customers through retailers. And then if they already had these arrangements with all these retailers all over the place, it was difficult for them to sell through the web, competing with their own distribution channels because that would cause noise, that would cause a conflict with the traditional channels. And those channels would probably say, well, if you want to sell directly to the end customer, please tell me, because I will stop selling your products here. And then those companies would look at, gee, I sell thousands of computers through my traditional retailers, and now they're pressuring me and saying that if I start selling through the web, they will stop selling my computers. I better stick to them. I better keep my traditional channels. That happened for many years. Those companies saw Dell getting larger and larger, and Dell using the internet in a way that they technically could use, but because of the way they had structured their businesses, was much more difficult for them than for Dell. Notice, Dell used infrastructural technology to get a competitive advantage based on distinction, based on differentiation of its product, or not the product, well, also the product, because each customer could get customized products, something that would be impossible if the product was already on the shelves of a retailer. Right? If you're going to buy a computer from a retailer, it's going to be the computer that they have on their shelf. They may give you even a discount if that's not necessarily what you wanted, but that's what you get, because they can't change the computer at the retailer's facilities. That would have to have been done at the assembler's place. Okay. So take Nicholas Carr here as a good headliner. The headlines are great. I think the idea between differentiation about this infrastructural technology and or proprietary technology as being an interesting way of distinguishing between two ways that you can use and develop technology in organizations, but only take his advice to stick to standards if you are at the conservative side of the scope of the range there with respect to investments in technology. If you think that you can benefit from using technology that is not standard yet, of course you have to assess the risks involved, and there are many risks for the innovator. One of them is that eventually even technologies that are proprietary and that are differentiating proprietary technologies, eventually they will also become standard infrastructural technology, right? I always say that if business is good for you, it means that it is not as good for someone else who's trying to become a better competitor to be able to challenge your leadership in the markets. Okay? So we always have to think, if you have a technology that is making the difference for you, the competition is probably working hard to make sure that they neutralize that advantage that you have, or even they're working towards building their own advantage, not only neutralizing your current edge, but also improving their own technology, so that they can become the leaders in the markets. Okay? What else do we have here? It's I usually like to, and that's something that you could probably do with some of the papers, when you're thinking about the summary that I want you to write. Think of what the objective of the author was. What is, after reading the whole paper, right? Think, what was the author's intention with this paper? What was the main idea? That surely has to be in your summary, right? Most of the papers that we are using for this course are either papers like this Nicholas Carr paper. They're not exactly and precisely academic papers. This one definitely isn't, because it's more like a Harvard Business Review, as we've said, is more like a dissemination journal, not a journal where academics publish their work directly. But even those papers that are more academic in the sense that it's academic writers writing to an academic audience, in the 90s, academy was still, at least in business and information systems, was still not as mature as it is today. So most of these papers will not present right at the introduction already a statement saying the objective of this paper is, which I usually recommend you to do in your papers, right? That you contextualize your work in the introduction, and probably in the last paragraph or one paragraph before the last in the introduction already have the objective of this paper is. They didn't have to concern about that so much in the 90s. I think there was not as much competition for the journal's space, so most good researchers, when they submitted their papers to journals, they would be published, I guess, so that they didn't have to be so strictly or follow so strict rules as we usually do these days. I usually recommend you to write very clearly what the objective is, because your paper is going to be reviewed by someone who's looking for the objective, and if the objective is not clear, they will say, well, the paper is interesting and everything, but we don't know exactly what the author wanted with it, right? I can assure you that after you read a full paper, and if you read it with a good focus on what was being discussed, you should be able to say what the objective was, even if it's not stated in a very direct manner. But most of these authors probably didn't do that because they were not concerned with a bureaucratic reviewer who would be looking for the objective and where it's precisely stated, the methodology, and if it's clearly stated in a session that should go in a specific place in the paper, and so on and so forth. Okay? So it would be interesting that you thought of what was the just after reading, you finished reading the paper and said, what was the main objective? Your perception of what and then you write, well, I think the main objective of the author here was, and you say what it was. And then you say what struck you the most, right? And I say, this may not have been the major issue here, but one thing that for me was important was when the author said this or that for whatever reason. Okay, this is what we want in your summaries, so that we have that, so that all the summaries get interesting for your colleagues to read afterwards. And in fact, that's we spend quite some time in our next classes, in the second half of the class, reading what the colleagues wrote, and then writing or giving feedback or reacting to what they wrote, either by just placing stars and saying yes, this was good, or by placing stars and commenting on that as well. Okay. One interesting thing is that here is and maybe an important argument for Mr. Carr is that he says, we don't value water, we value gold. And we don't value water because water is all over. So if it's water, if anything that is everywhere, we don't value. So that's the reason why he thinks if you're not an IT company, you shouldn't be spending a lot on IT, because IT as a commodity, as standard, is there for everyone. So that's another reason for going along with the standards. Standards tend to be cheaper. If you want to try something different, then that will cost a lot more. Let me see here if I see any. You'll see that some of our authors have boxes or pictures in their papers that maybe the first time you see them, you don't understand them, but when you read the paper, you notice that figure explains the whole paper. I like that specifically about Venkatraman's papers. There's always a picture that explains the whole paper, a picture that if you get to it before reading the paper, you'll not necessarily understand. You may have an idea of what is being attempted there, but you don't have a fully understanding. But a picture that after you read a paper thoroughly and you understood it, a picture that if you see again in 6 months, a year from now, or in the future, will allow you to remember the whole paper, right? I don't see this in Mr. Carr's paper here. He doesn't use that kind of artifact, but I think this is something that you could think of also for your papers, right? This is easier said than done. And one of the reasons that I said that I like that paper that I wrote with Ricardo Engelbert is that we came up with a model that after you read the paper, you see the model, you say, well, I don't need to read the paper again because the model allows me to remember everything, right? But I myself find it difficult to do that most of the times, to have a picture that gives an idea of the whole paper. And that's probably one of the reasons why I like that paper more than I like many of the other papers that I write. So I guess this is the main thing: infrastructural technology, proprietary technology. A focus and a recommendation that we go for infrastructural technology if we are not a technology company. Of course, if we are a technology company, we will have to be innovators in technology, because technology companies live, or they make their business of turning what is a proprietary technology to themselves into infrastructural technologies to others. Right? Microsoft, for example, has a proprietary technology for itself. We usually, when we use it, the common sense, when we say, oh, Microsoft technology is proprietary, Linux is not proprietary, right? We usually have that distinction. Nicholas Carr uses the term proprietary in a slightly different way, because what he says, proprietary is something that you can exploit on your own. So the same technology, the way he uses the term, the same technology can be proprietary to one agent and infrastructural to others. I think we all have to agree that Microsoft's technology is infrastructural to most of us, right? If I write a document here on Word, I will send it to you as a doc file, and I will assume that you have a way of opening that file, although the doc file is a proprietary format developed by Microsoft. Okay, so for us it's infrastructural. In fact we use Microsoft technology mainly because we consider it as a standard, an easy way of connecting to other users of Microsoft products. Microsoft products became much more useful when we started having our computers connected in networks and we started sharing files. When we only shared, for example, a document on paper, it wasn't very important to anyone if it had been written in words, or at that stage, WordPerfect, or what else? What were some of the other? Not much before that. I'm talking about the 90s. It was WordStar in the early 90s. It didn't matter what editor, what word processor you were using, because you use that word processor on your own. There was no network effect. But when we started having the possibility of sharing documents with others, it started becoming important that we used standards, because I wanted to share a document in a file and I wanted you to open. So if I had Word and you had WordPerfect, I was not able to share that with you. And in fact, Microsoft used in the 1990s, and it still does until today. Microsoft used its very uh, good understanding of how important this network effect was for its business to make sure that it would not have any competition at all, right? While WordPerfect, for example, in the 90s was trying to make it impossible for people to pirate, to copy its products, Microsoft was saying, it was actually telling you, you know, it's ugly that you pirate my software. I don't like it, but at the same time, I'm not doing anything against it. Please, yeah, do that because you're 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 building my network, and this network of users will have a value. And in fact, in the future, I will charge you. You may not be able to, or maybe willing to pay now, but in the future, I will make sure that I get paid by you. And in fact, that's what's happening today, right? If we, and we probably were all pirates at some stage, in many cases, even I would say, sort of pushed into piracy by companies that said, well, you know, it's you have to pay $300 for this, but if you copy from someone there, I will not pay attention to it because my intention is really to build a network. Microsoft did that in a very, we can't say in a very open way because it's not stated, yes, feel free to pirate my software. But at the same time, if we notice the way it dealt with piracy over the years, you'll notice that it was very tolerant to piracy while it was building a network. And still today, right, if someone has a pirate's Windows copy in their notebook or a pirate's Office or whatever, it would be very easy for them. We're connected all the time, so it would be very easy for them to just check from time to time and see if we had a. In fact, they do that and they tell you, right? They tell you, oh, you know, this doesn't seem to be licensed, but they don't block you immediately because if they block you, they will be reducing the value that Microsoft has to the other ones that are paying. So they keep giving you ways of surviving with their pirate software that it would be very easy for them to just say, well, from tomorrow on, there is no pirate Microsoft Office because every time you log in, you'll be checked in one of our servers, and then we'll say, yes, you're allowed to use it or not. You're not allowed to use it. They never do that because they have a proprietary technology for them. Proprietary in that case because they use it as a distinctive factor in the market to provide them with a competitive edge. At the same time, all their efforts and their strategy is to make their technology to become our infrastructure technology. Right? Linux and the open software in general also tries and is to some extent an infrastructure technology because they also rely on the fact that they have a large base of users, which makes it of value to people. And one of the ways they try to become more valuable, for example, is trying to read and being able to read Microsoft Doc files and allowing you to use that formats, although they are not Microsoft. Right? Microsoft for many years didn't allow others to use their formats and try to make it difficult for us because, of course, Microsoft said it is standard, but it's my standard. I rule it, right? My ways. So as I already know that it became infrastructure to all of you, I want you to have Word. I don't want you to have Open Office or whatever other product that is available around. Right? So it is always, whoever is not infrastructure is always attempting. One of the strategies is becoming part of or being able to benefit from the network effects of those that are part of the main infrastructure. So it was to the interest of Open Office, for example, to read doc files. for many years, it was not to the interest of Microsoft to open ODT files, right? In fact, they only started doing that much more recently. And I don't know exactly why they did that. Probably to look good, right? To be able to say, no, you were mistaken. We never had this idea of locking everyone into our software. Look, we even allow people to save files that they build on my word processor in that other platform. You can also save in ODT, but that's something sort of recent. I don't know if they've done that, you know, based on just marketing issues to look nicer, or if they did that even for some legal, if it was imposed by a legal decision, for example, to escape or to prevent some court action or something like that. Many times we as users here, we don't have access to all the information, so we can only guess. But let's say it's not very reasonable based on just their economic interests that that Microsoft Word now saves files in ODT formats, right? They didn't have to do that, because by doing that they allow some let's say another group that was not infrastructural or was not so infrastructural to become part of that infrastructure, to benefit from being part of the infrastructure. Anyway, I think we'll probably stop here. Unless if anyone has, well, of course, you may have questions here. If anyone has questions from a distance, that's probably a good time for us to check if our WhatsApp group is working. Any questions from you? You had already had the opportunity to read the paper, right? So for those who had already the chance of reading this paper before this class, I would still ask you to write your insights, write a summary of this paper in our forum that we can have available for everyone. For those who have not read it yet, well, if you have time, we have 15 days until our next class. If you have time, do that as well. But the most important thing for us, for our classes, is always that you come to class after having read the papers that are assigned for that day, right? So if by any chance you think that you're not going to have time to go back to this paper, please, at least for now, go ahead to next classes papers that are Bryn Johnson's Beyond the Productivity Paradox, and Henderson and Venkatraman, Leveraging IT for Business Transformation. Any questions? No? Danilo, any questions there from the guys? No? You're a very quiet audience for now, but don't worry, it's not a way, you're not going to be able to hide very long. You'll see that our Moodle, our technologists will force you into interacting, right? And again, I understand that for many of you, doing this in English is a challenge. I have to tell you that it's a challenge for me too. This is the most tiring class I have in the week. I have many other classes, but teaching in English for me is also an effort. But at the same time, I think we're doing something here that will be important for our futures, and if possibly even for the future of the way that we have lectures. I don't think that lectures in the future are going to be like ours. I think these lectures are always boring, right? When someone is talking, the others are listening. I think it will still have to change a lot, but let's think of this as a starting point, and know that you can't hide, because if your summaries for the papers are not there at the beginning of the class, we will all notice what happened here. Why hasn't this person still uploaded their summaries? Okay. So again, very quickly, for those who haven't done it yet, I need you to provide me with your contact information here. I need you, and then I need you to give us your impressions of the papers you have already read down here. For IT, it does not matter, for those who have already read it. And for our next meeting, which will happen on, what is it? What day is it going to be? The 23rd. Then bring Johnson and Venkatraman. Before we start class, I need to see these replies here. They will have to be, if not exactly the number of students in class, they will have to be very close so that only one or two people at the most will have an excuse. Sorry, my grandmother died or something, but don't kill too many grandmothers during the course. It's not nice, and they usually don't like them regardless of them being with us or not. Okay, so see you in a couple of weeks. I'll be checking my email or any other ways of contacting to clear any problems that you may be having. I understand that we'll still have to try and make this a little smoother. Please keep me aware of any difficulties that you're having, right? Okay, so see you in 2 weeks' time.